A boy is dead, and the man responsible, the man who should have been taking care of him, is sitting back with everything that boy owned, including his very life, and thinking about how he's going to enjoy it all. Doesn't that make you sick?
I'm never drinking again. And I mean it this time. So please don't use the S word. Why didn't you stop me? Aren't you supposed to be the voice of reason?
That's not how I remember it, and I was thinking of the tragedy of Raoul Delorme. Anyway, get your game face on because we have some work to do.
All right, fine. Duty calls. And that means this is a case for...
Two old dicks.
We are two old dicks here to share history's mysteries. We hope you care. We are two old dicks and ink and half.
I have a confession to make.
I'm not a priest.
No, you certainly aren't. Do you remember how you decided to leave the other night when I summoned Joe Beef's, sisters over?
Yep, I'm married.
Good man. That's why I gave them your name when they asked me what mine was. If you start getting calls from a couple of super centenarians, feel free to cut me adrift.
You used my name? Good grief. I'll give my wife the heads up. Considering this is you involved, I have a feeling she'll have no trouble believing this wild tale.
Well, fine then. Tell the folks a bit about who we are while we wait for our guest to arrive.
With pleasure. Welcome back to Episode 3 of The Mystery of the Felonious Father, folks. I'm Dave Lalonde. I'm a retired police detective and the author of the Inspector Jack Butler Mysteries.
And I'm John Wilson Murray, better known as the Great Detective. Sorry about getting you in trouble, Lalonde. I'd like to make it up to you by telling everyone what a fabulous writer you are. Could you tell them where to buy your books?
The entire series is available on Amazon, and I've added a link below. I'll also be coming out with audiobooks shortly on Spotify. These are historic police procedural mysteries set in the 1980s in Ontario, Canada. They're based somewhat on my own experiences, giving the reader a behind-the-scenes view of what a police investigation really looks like. I think people will find the stories gripping and entertaining. Check them out.
I've read them and I love them. And, wait a minute. Look who just got here. Detective Georges Farah-Lajoie, the famous Montreal detective and lead investigator on this case. Have a seat, Lajoie.
Monsieur Lalonde and Inspector Murray, it is wonderful to be back. I have been very busy and have much to tell you.
I can't wait, but, my head is a little foggy today. Must be the wonderful Montreal weather. Could you remind us of where we were, Lalonde?
Our case takes place in 1922 in one of the world's premier cities, Montreal, which is in the Canadian province of Quebec. On Saturday, January the 7th, 1922, at 7 a.m., the body of a young man was found outside a Montreal city maintenance shed on the Queen Mary Road near the junction of Snowden Avenue. Workers had left the shed the night before at around 6 p.m., so there was an approximately 12-hour window of opportunity for the body to have been there. His hands were tied to his sides with rope, and a cloth was twisted tightly around his neck. There were no marks visible on the body, and no identification was found during their initial search. The body was taken to the morgue on Craig Street by wagon, and a more detailed examination of the body was begun. An envelope was discovered on the person of the deceased with the name Raoul Delorme on it, along with an address. Detectives went to that address to see if the occupants might provide further information on the deceased, and were surprised to find a Roman Catholic priest living there. The priest identified himself as Father Delorme and advised detectives that Raoul was his half-brother. He agreed to accompany them to the morgue, where he identified the deceased as Raoul Delorme, aged 25. He advised them that Raoul had lived with him and 3 of their sisters, but was home on Christmas vacation from the University of Ottawa. The last time he had seen him was during the afternoon of the day before, at home. At 7 p.m., Raoul had called to say he would be going out on the town with friends and would not be home that night. This was considered very unusual behavior for him, as he was a quiet loner with very few friends. Throughout their encounter with him, the detectives found the priest's demeanor strangely remote and unaffected, particularly considering that the deceased was his brother. An autopsy was done on the body of Raoul the next day. The delay was due to the fact that his body had been completely frozen, indicating it had been outside since the early evening of the night before. The neck area of the clothing primarily was soaked with blood. There were no money or valuables found, save for a broken watch chain located in the vest. The cause of death was discovered to have been 8 gunshot wounds to the head. 2 intact bullets were able to be extracted, and they appeared to come from a small caliber pistol. The forensic scientists were confident they could match the bullets to a particular weapon if it was found. An inquest was begun the next morning on Monday, January 9th, 1922. Testimony was heard from the pathologist and Father Delorme, and then the inquest was adjourned to allow the police to gather more information. I turn the floor over to our guest now to have him explain how he became involved.
I was a member of the Montreal Police Murder Squad, and I began working with the initial lead investigators immediately after the morning of the inquest's opening on January 9th. Detective Captain Joseph Desgrosseilliers and Detective Sergeant Théodule Tom Pigeon were my colleagues. We retraced the steps of the investigation to ensure that I was familiar with all the particulars. My colleagues and I then returned to interview Father Delorme again, at his residence at 190 Rue Saint-Hubert. He advised us that they were a wealthy family, having inherited money and property from their late father. During the interview, I noticed an injury to the wrist of Father Delorme, and he told me it was the result of a recent fall. He advised us that he had given Raoul $20 on the day he was last seen, to supplement a $5 bill that he already had. He also told us that Raoul was carrying a quantity of fake money which he had obtained from the University of Ottawa for use during his business classes.
Fascinating. Was there anything you wanted to say at this point, Inspector Murray?
Well, since you ask my permission, old boy, I'm going to ask you to hold on a bit. I happen to know you have some real fans out there that would like to express their gratitude but don't know how. Perhaps a like and subscribe might do it.
And you call me a shameless huckster?
It's different when I do it. Okay, Lajoie, the floor's yours again.
You have a lovely home, and if it gives you any comfort, it is still standing in Montreal. And I've read your memoirs regarding your deliberations that night, and they are a master class on analytical thinking. I wonder if it would be imposing upon you to summarize your process for us.
He's saying he hasn't got a good attention span, Lajoie. Go ahead, read the whole thing, nice and slow.
You are most amusing, Inspector Murray. And you like to, how do you say, taquiner. Keys. Thank you for the kind words, Monsieur Lalonde. The quality of my home is most truly found in the presence of my wife and our 10 children. It will be my honor to provide you with my summary.
10 children? Oh, my word! You really are a Catholic!
Very true, Inspector Murray. A Greek Catholic, actually. At one time, I had studied for the priesthood. I made my choice to leave Syria and come to Canada, though, where I met my wife and, let us say, my passions were diverted. Bien, back to our case. It is generally admitted that a crime is committed for the following reasons: spying, revenge, robbery, insanity, or personal interest. The first question I asked myself was Raoul Delorme involved in the world of espionage? In Montreal, in 1922, we were still feeling the effects of the Great War. Moreover, with the Bolsheviks having recently deposed the great Tsar of Russia and Montreal being a hub for immigrants and the labor movement, we rightfully feared that. Thank goodness that war ended all others.
My goodness. I hope the Tsar and his lovely family are all well, and that they get rid of those nasty baloney chicks soon.
Bolsheviks, my dear Inspector, and I will hold my tongue on that. As for Montreal, perhaps you have heard of Charles Hazlitt Kahn, one of our prominent lawyers who investigated the radicals on behalf of the Canadian government? He was instrumental in ensuring Canada had a national strategy to investigate the radicals. A marvelous man. I know this situation also existed during your era, Inspector Murray, particularly during and after the Civil War.
I never met Kahan, but I like him already. As for me, espionage certainly was widespread in my time. In fact, that's how I got my start in the world of investigations. Anyone want to hear about that?
Maybe later. Espionage, while not ruled out completely in my era, would not have been high on the list of considerations, absent any evidence pointing to that. I will swear you, gentlemen, and the folks watching at home, to secrecy on this, though. I will be profiling a policeman named John Leopold in a future episode, and can confirm that during our new friend's time, espionage and radical politics were a very legitimate concern. So, we've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole on this, but the question begs to be asked, then. Was Raoul Delorme associated with the kind of people or activities that may have brought him into that world?
I can say with confidence that he was not. Let us move on then to the motive of revenge, focusing on what we know from our interviews. There were no indications of rivalries at school, nor was there any mention of any woman in his life. He was considered a rather dull boy, of limited intelligence, and a corresponding number of friends and acquaintances. I do not say that to be cool. I merely state the facts. In short, he lived a quiet, nondescript, and inoffensive life.
Not the worst epitaph, but sadly dull, regardless. What about robbery? We do know that his watch and limited amount of money, including the alleged wad of false bills, were gone.
Father Delorme's watch and the money Father Delorme claims to have given him, along with the fake bills that, once again, Father Delorme said he had.
I think I catch your drift on that, Lajoie.
Beyond the suspect information provided by Father Delorme, we know that Raoul lived in a very frugal manner while at school. And while he was known to be wealthy, none knew him to carry money on his person. The $20 that the priest claimed to have given Raoul was intended to last him for any incidental expenses he might incur upon his return to school for the remainder of the school year.
That is frugal.
Indeed, it also brings into question the suggestion made, again by Father Delorme, that Raoul had planned to go out for a supper in style, as he claims, the night he went missing. The two known acquaintances that he had from college who were in Montreal would have recognized the counterfeit bills Father Delorme claims Raoul had for what they were, since they would have seen them at school. In short, the evening out was not only grossly out of character, but he did not have the money to pursue it.
And then there is the extent they would have had to go to bind him up. The issue of the shoes never having been worn outside. Also, that level of violence, involving the number of rounds fired into his head is not common in my experience with a robbery. Is that the same in Montreal?
Precisely, Inspector Murray. It is not typical of a robbery, nor of the kind of crime that professional criminals would engage in, and in that manner. One other matter I considered was the cost of hiring a chauffeur to go out to where the cap was dropped in Côte-Saint-Michel and back. At least $20 would have been required, and that would make the profits negligible. No, I do not think robbery was the motive.
Did Father Delorme's watch, the one that was allegedly carried by Raoul and subsequently stolen, ever turn up? I had the impression it was an expensive one, from Burke's Jewelers, which was a high-end national chain of stores in Canada, for those who don't know. Knowing what we do about Father Delorme at this point, he strikes me as the kind of man that would not care to lose that.
You impress me, Monsieur Lalonde. Let me just reply to that by asking you to be patient and to remember how annoyed Father Delorme was by me and by my refusing his cigars in favor of my Pall Mall cigarettes.
You know I'm never going to sleep until I find out, eh? Oh, well, I think you mentioned the motive of a lunatic attack.
Yes, well, attacks by individuals such as this are most often done openly and spontaneously, governed by uncontrollable influence. A lack of appreciation for the gravity of their actions is a quality of this type of individual. The murder of Raoul Delorme speaks of cunning and planning and an attempt to portray the crime as something other than what it was. No, I do not see anything to indicate, based upon the evidence, and I work with evidence, not conjecture, that this was a crime of insanity.
Follow the evidence, as we said in my time. Inspector Murray's old friend Arthur Conan Doyle would have described it through his friend Sherlock Holmes as forming theories based upon facts.
Speaking of which, anyone else feel like a drink about now? Doyle was a great man to share a nip or two with.
In a bit, Inspector Murray, we have one more motive to consider. Detective, if you will.
Bien sûr, but of course. We come to the motive for which the greatest amount of evidence exists. Was anybody personally interested in the death of Raoul Delorme? Was there something they stood to gain from it? Raoul had inherited a fortune from his father, upon which he was to become the sole owner. The estate was currently managed and under the control of his older brother, Father Delorme. He was pursuing a commercial course at the University of Ottawa, but his lack of intelligence was making it very difficult for him, and it was taking much longer than normal.
Not the kind of mind required to handle that kind of money from the sound of things, nor to understand how it was being handled by his brother.
Exactly. However, a lack of intellect is often not recognized by the one who possessed it, and Raoul was determined to take over the management of his fortune upon graduating.
Whoa! What the hell was that?
Never mind.
The question, then, is who stood to inherit his money upon his death? It was at this point in my pondering that I realized I had been sitting there for 8 hours in my deliberations. After a hasty cup of coffee, I returned to headquarters.
Feeling pretty good about your theory, eh, Lajoie? Me too. How about you folks at home? What do you think? Nothing wrong with having an informed opinion, and you've been informed. Add your thoughts to the comments section. Back to you, Lajoie.
Chief Lepage provided us with a collection of anonymous letters that had been received, purporting to offer us clues and pleading eloquently in favor of the priest. Others, it must be said, expressed hostility towards him. Whilst we were in the midst of considering this new material, Father Delorme called Detective Pigeon and told him that he wanted to see us. We proceeded directly there. Yet again, cigars were offered to us, and yet again, I declined in favor of my Pall Malls. Father Delorme began by asking us if the analysis of the blood from Côte Saint-Michel was finished, and I replied that it had not. He then presented us with more letters of the type that Chief Lepage had already provided. He advised us, as was the custom of the day, that the body of Raoul was laid out upstairs, amongst several candles in his bedroom.
I wish to give him a sumptuous funeral, and I believe that your men should be there in case the murderers should mix with the crowd.
He certainly likes to be in charge. Perhaps he could choose the ties you'll be wearing at the funeral as well. He seems to be relishing the drama and theater of the moment.
His enthusiasm was undeniable, as was his passion for directing every aspect of the proceeding. Regardless, we assured him we would be there and returned to Côte Saint-Michel. We still needed to ensure we expended all efforts with respect to the cap that had been found. To that end, we went to all the numerous roadhouses, taverns, and dance halls in the locality, asking for any information or signs of Raoul Delorme. We then received a tip that a man fitting Raoul's description was seen in the company of two women who are, shall we say, well known to the police for their criminal associations. We returned to Montreal to speak to them.
Great Scott! Whew. I'm breathless, and I thought horse and buggy travel was exhausting.
The women were interviewed, well, let us say assiduously. The information had no merit. Raoul Delorme had not been with them, nor had they seen him. That took us the remainder of the day, and our efforts bore no fruit.
They seem to be very wholesome young ladies. Did you, get their names?
Yes, well, they are somewhere in the file, I suppose, Inspector. In any case, we then returned to Montreal and to the residence of Father Delorme for an important question I wanted to ask him. We made haste to get there. We would like to see your brother's will. We understand that it is likely at the officer of Notary Bélanger. This seemed to fluster him, and he answered hurriedly.
I rather think Raoul's will has been left in Ottawa, at the college. I hope that Raoul did not forget me in his will. I have been so good to him.
At this, he advised us that he had an important caller waiting for him, and so we decided to leave and conclude our day. The funeral for Raoul Delorme took place the next day at the Cathédrale Saint-Jacques, and the church was full. Father Delorme ensured that everyone in the crowd had been given a candle to hold. Reverend Henri Gauthier, the parish priest, presided over the service, but it was Father Delorme himself who sang the Requiem Mass. His performance was very moving for all, particularly himself. Sobs choked him, but he mastered them immediately.
A star is born. I'm overcome by the cynicism of this. I mean, we do know this man almost certainly murdered his own brother in cold blood, right?
You are correct, Inspector. I was certain of it. Knowing the perpetrator of a crime and proving it beyond a reasonable doubt, though, as you know, are two separate things. I felt we were close, very close.
What sort of follow-up were you and your colleagues engaged in at that point?
We followed up on every tip the public gave us, and there were many. Some people claimed to have seen suspicious vehicles moving about downtown, and others thought they had seen a man fitting Raoul Delorme's description leaving a club in the early hours. All of these claims were investigated. The people and vehicles mentioned identified and located. and the individuals involved cleared. It became apparent to us that the original autopsy had focused primarily upon the gunshot wounds which had caused the death. The information which we had received since that time from Father Delorme brought into question the last meal of Raoul Delorme.
In other words, did Raoul go out to dinner that evening as Father Delorme claimed he had? Or had his last meal been with the family at noon on the Friday of his disappearance? You are clearly considering the possibility that the murder may have occurred at some point between that last known meal and the alleged call made to Father Delorme. Dead men don't make phone calls.
Indeed, they do not.
This has a different nuance than the issue of time of death being ascertained on the basis of stomach contents, which was addressed during our first case, the mystery of Simpering Jim, where we discussed that and the science behind it. Give us a recap without all that Latin stuff, would you, Lalonde?
My pleasure. And again, I would suggest our viewers watch those episodes for the full description. In short, the general rule is that food is still recognizable in the stomach in the first 2 hours after it is eaten. It appears partially digested between 2 and 4 hours, and after that, it empties into the small intestine. The food is, and this is generally speaking, emptied from the stomach in around 10 hours.
And, as we established in the Simpering Jim mystery, digestion does not continue after death.
Well, that was a belief held in your time, Inspector Murray, but that's since changed. In 1901, a scientist named Farah did find that some digestion could occur post-mortem, and that was later refined and confirmed. And in fairness to the Jim Allison case we looked at, even then, digestion rate as an accurate assessment of time of death was considered weak and would not stand on its own.
I still see value in the stomach contents, though, gentlemen, in terms of corroborating other evidence as to the last meal, and even to assess the broad question of whether death occurred before or after a particular meal was eaten.
I believe that remains arguable, but Fair and I do not think stomach contents should be arbitrarily dismissed, particularly with respect to challenging the alibi provided by Father Delorme in this case, as you propose. For example, if the witnesses said that Raoul ate roast beef for lunch and undigested lobster was found in his stomach, that might support the idea that he ate elsewhere afterwards.
He had lobster? That rascal! I love lobster. Where did he get it?
He didn't. I was using that as a counterfactual to propose a scenario.
And if undigested roast beef were to be found in his stomach contents, and that is what he ate at noon, then I believe it could form a potential, albeit not conclusive, challenge to him having made the alleged phone call to Father Delorme 7 hours later.
That's where an effective judicial process comes into play, including the use of expert witnesses and properly challenging the evidence. Let's say, though, that at some point evidence supported the theory that Raoul was actually dead when Father Delorme claims he spoke to him on the phone at 7 p.m. And it's starting to look to me like he was. Then I think it would be reasonable to say that the call was spurious, and that Father Delorme had good reason to believe Raoul wouldn't be dropping in later to talk about his lobster feast.
There you go with that lobster again. And what the heck does spurious mean? You know I don't speak Spanish.
Spurious means, well, humbug. What did you do next, Detective?
I sought assistance from the highest levels of the Montreal police to make my case for a renewed examination of the body of Raoul Delorme, for the presence of drugs in his stomach. Our police chief, Pierre Belanger himself, in the company of Chief of Detectives Lepage, made our plea. As a result, the coroner ordered the body to be transported from the crypt at the Côte des Neiges Cemetery to the morgue on Craig Street for a second post-mortem. We were aware that this might be controversial and that the newspapers would surely learn of the second autopsy. So we made sure to suggest that this was being done for the purpose of toxicology. The armchair detectives persisted in their supposition that he had been drugged and abducted prior to meeting his fate. The autopsy would be done on Saturday, January 14th.
In your days, gentlemen, the examination of stomach contents were used for toxicology rather than blood like today, so it was a plausible ruse. Blood was not used in your time because it decomposed too quickly in the scientific instruments of today, like gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, did not exist. They had to rely on wet chemistry, so to speak, in your time, like stomach contents.
Mass spectrochromotopogigio? Sounds more like the science fiction of Jules Verne you're talking about there, Lalonde. I sometimes think you're trying to have me on. Next thing you'll be claiming is that we sent a man to the moon. Ha!
Okay, moving right along then.
Thank you. While Dr. Derome and MacTaggart prepared for their grisly task that Saturday, I boarded the train at Bonaventure Station and proceeded to Ottawa, in search of the elusive will of Raoul Delorme. I first went to Hull, which as you know is adjacent to our capital city of Ottawa. We had been told that two suspicious characters, unknown in Hull, had left an automobile, quite covered with mud, in a private garage. The men had claimed to come from Montreal, and the informant who provided the information suspected they were involved in the Delorme affair.
Very thorough of you.
Thank you. It was a simple matter for me to track down first the car, then the owner, who had nothing to do with the crime. I satisfied myself in that regard. Next, I moved on to Ottawa to speak to the Oblate Fathers at the university. I spoke with Father Legault, the prefect of discipline, who confirmed for me that Raoul had in fact made a will last year, before his surgical operation. That will had been sealed in an envelope and given to Father Rome. He advised that he was unaware of the contents, and that a court order would be required to read the will.
The boy only left the college once during his stay with us, before returning to his home in Montreal for Christmas, and that was briefly during the afternoon of November 13th. I can confirm that his conduct was quite above reproach.
So, no will for now, and I suppose we can't blame them. It does confirm that one exists, though, and it also confirms the information you have regarding Raoul's conduct and behavior that makes the likelihood of him going out on the town in Montreal even more unlikely.
Yes, and upon receipt of that information, I boarded the train at Union Station in Ottawa and returned to Montreal to report my findings. We had just discussed the results of my inquiries in Ottawa when a very important tip came in. Father Delorme had apparently gone a few times to the shop of Oscar Haynes at 237 City Hall Avenue, which is a portion of Notre Dame Avenue East in Old Montreal. Quite nearby, my colleagues and I decided to go there immediately and speak with Haynes. I did not omit to bring the Bayard pistol and steel bullets which I had taken from the automobile of Father Delorme. Mr. Haynes told us that he knew Father Delorme as a client, and that he often repaired his revolver for him. He advised that the last call the priest made to his shop was on December 27th, when he exchanged an old Iver Johnson revolver for an automatic Bayard pistol.
Great Scott! Lajoie! You've got him! You've got that murderous, sacrilegious swine! Oops! Let me just make the sign of the cross here, just in case I'm wrong.
The precautionary profession of your faith is not required, Inspector Murray. Mr. Haynes was shown the pistol we had seized from the priest, which he examined, including the serial number. He checked his books quickly and offered his conclusion.
This is the gun which I gave Father Delorme in exchange for the old revolver on December 27th, last. I also recognize the cartridges you show me. They are the ones I sold him.
Feeling quite satisfied with this result, we returned to headquarters. Bringing back this information, we justified more and more a certain opinion of mine. I begged leave of my colleagues and sat down at my desk to put my thoughts onto paper.
I am positively quivering with excitement at this point. I see your case through my eyes, but I am most eager to listen to your articulation of it.
Me too, but I must say, with regret, that it's time for us to pause the case again. Gentlemen, please take a well-deserved break and enjoy your drinks.
Santé, my dear Monsieur Lalonde. This is a marvelous idea.
Sláinte, lads! I am rather parched now that you mention it. So, ladies and gentlemen, until we meet again, in the excellent company of our colleague Lajoie, here we are.
Two old dicks.
We are two old dicks and we say goodbye to all until next day, when we will share the tricks we know and how the clues began to glow.